One of the most frequently encountered tactical maneuvers in the long and storied history of chess is this bishop pin on our knight. At first glance, it's a really annoying move, since it keeps us from ever moving this knight again unless we want to lose our queen. In this video, I'm going to show you 4 ways to punish this bishop move, because it's actually pretty easy to counter, and most players don't know about it. And that's not even the best part. Do you know what the best part is? The best part is that you can use this no matter what opening you play, since this pin shows up in most games. For example, what happens if, just to name one, someone plays the Scandinavian defense against us? It's a pretty popular defense, especially for players rated under 2000, right? For example, we threaten the queen, it retreats, we develop the knight, and now the pin starts. This is just a sample development, okay? You'll likely run into this in almost all of the games you play. What's the important thing here? Take a look at the bishop's pin on our knight. Alright, a lot of you might think a good move would be to chase this bishop away with h3, so that if they trade, the annoying pin is gone. Of course, the bishop can always retreat and keep the pin going. Well, that's an interesting plan. Another interesting plan to get rid of the pin is to play bishop to e2. Yeah, all this sounds great, chess teacher, but is this really what you're going to teach me? Well, no, neither of these two plans is the right one. The idea is to develop actively. For example, moving the bishop to the c4 square here would be a highly effective move, even no matter that our bishop is pinned. Let me explain why. Here, the most normal thing is for them to continue developing. For example, knight to c6 or knight to f6. And here we'd already have a clear advantage and could take advantage of this bishop, which is really badly placed. If they had played knight to c6, it would be even more spectacular and easier. Why? Because this knight isn't defending the bishop. Knight to f6 is defending the bishop on g4. Ah, but pay attention to the following. Here we already have the advantage anyway. Playing bishop takes f7 is a classic tactical and winning move when our knight is pinned to the queen like this. What are we doing? We're luring the king out. Now, if the king simply decides to move over here and not accept the sacrifice, this game becomes way too easy. We could continue, for example, with knight to e5, check, and we'd take this bishop, which is attacked by 2 pieces, so black can't get away. They have to, for example, capture this bishop. And now the move is exactly the same. Knight to e5 wins the game. We take advantage of the discovered attack to check and attack the bishop with 2 pieces. Remember how I told you that if they had played knight to c6, it would have been easier? Way easier, because this knight wouldn't be defending this bishop. And we could have even jumped to this side, since we could have captured the bishop with the queen. And from here, if we look at how the game will end, let's suppose these exchanges happen, we end up with an extra pawn. And not only that, but now this game is way too easy to win. Our opponent has moved the king, so it's going to stay in the center for the whole game. We're going to castle, we're going to attack the king, and it's going to be a really comfortable game for us. We could even do it in a much more spectacular way. Instead of playing bishop takes f7, which would be an excellent sacrifice because we'd get back the bishop on g4, we could do it in a brilliant way. Play knight to e5 directly, so now we're attacking the bishop directly with 2 pieces. If the bishop moves away, we could checkmate right here. Of course, a lot of your opponents will be tempted to win the queen, since this bishop was pinning the knight, so when it moves, they can capture the queen. But the outcome is exactly the same. Bishop takes f7, and thanks to the knight, that would be checkmate. Depending on the game and your position, you can choose whether to go straight for the bishop sacrifice or jump with the knight to e5 to try to deliver checkmate. For example, a typical game, e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, Italian opening, bishop to c5, knight to c3, knight to f6. A very calm, very normal game. You can see it, right? But white, for example, at this point, is already trying to pin. It really doesn't matter what moves have been played on the board. The important thing in this video is to focus on what happens when they try to pin this knight. In this case, it's too soon to try to pin it. Why? White should have waited until we castled the king. This way, since the king isn't castled, we have a big advantage. What is it? That we can successfully launch a powerful pawn expansion and do it with absolute and total success. It is very important to remember this key point. When your knight gets pinned and you haven't castled yet, you have a truly fantastic opportunity to go on the attack. We attack the bishop. If it gets traded, that's great, because then our queen would join the attack, targeting the knight, and our pin would be really effective, since we'd have two pieces attacking their knight. But usually, when we force this dark squared bishop to move away, it retreats back to h4, maintaining its very annoying and strong pin on our knight. But what we're saying is that now we can initiate a truly spectacular and decisive kingside attack with g5. So we're going to secure a victory in this game without a single doubt. A lot of you who are a bit more experienced might be wondering, can't white do the typical sacrifice here? The knight takes the pawn on g5, the pawn recaptures on g5, and the bishop takes back on g5, effectively keeping the pin? No, they can't. And I'll explain why. Because we're not castled. Right now, they've basically given us a knight in exchange for giving us even more attacking chances. So it's all good for us. We're attacking the bishop, and it's gonna have trouble getting away. We're gonna castle long, and we'll have open files to attack our opponent's castled king. It would be a huge mistake in this position, after we've pushed g5, to try to capture with knight takes g5. I'll say it again, this capture would work if we were castled. Alright, so here, what should the white pieces do? Well, they have no choice but to move this bishop back. And now, pay attention, notice the difference. Now, the bishop comes in to pin their knight. Wait a minute, chess teacher, didn't you just tell me this wasn't a good idea? No, that's not what I said. I'm showing you when it's the right time to punish them. In this case, our opponent can't push the pawn, because this bishop is blocking the g-pawn. Do you see it? So now, trying to chase away this bishop doesn't work anymore, because it could just retreat here and keep the pin going without any trouble. That's why here white should just keep playing their game. Attacking our bishop doesn't help them, you see. And now I'm gonna finish this game for you with an example, because this was an actual game and it was a super easy way to win with the black pieces. This game is already looking really good for the player with the black pieces. As you can see, I started the first example with the white pieces and now with the black pieces. This means that it really doesn't matter which color we're playing with. We have a huge advantage if we know how to take advantage of these kinds of pins. Alright, here the player with the black pieces simply continued advancing their pawns, taking advantage of the fact that the king is castled and the king of the player with the black pieces isn't yet. Now there's a threat to advance and trap the dark square bishop. That's why, here, white tried the aggressive counterplay of h4, aiming for the potential capture of the pawn on g5 and also preventing this black pawn from advancing further to threaten the bishop. Now, looking at the board, there's no problem at all. Black simply continued with their powerful attack on the king side. Is there a good pin here? Yes, because they keep piling on the pressure with the knight and the bishop, something that white hasn't had time to do when they've tried to pin. Alright, so how did the game continue? The game went on like this. Pawn takes pawn, threatening this knight. And do you think the knight left now? No. The attack continued with h4, a wonderful move. It threatens the bishop, and not just the bishop, but also threatens to open lines for the rook. Once that rook has a clear path, it'll be much easier to attack. The game continued as follows. The bishop retreated, logically, and now, instead of pulling back the knight, the attack continued. As you can see, this attack is so strong that we don't mind losing the knight since we have a big advantage. And the game ended as follows, in a very simple way. Pawn takes pawn. And after king takes pawn, simply, the winning move is bishop takes on f3, check, and they'll have to give up the queen. As you can see, the game continued like this, and now this bishop can be captured anyway. There's also the threat of queen takes f6, but here the player with the white pieces, logically, resigned, since the lack of material caused by trying to pin when it wasn't the right time has been devastating. I'll set up the white pieces again. d4, d5, knight to f3, knight to f6, e3, and there goes our opponent, pinning our knight. The moves I make before the pin really are not particularly important. What is truly important is that you really pay close attention to the ideas I'm giving you for when this knight here gets pinned. Now, what we can do is start going on a bit of a hunt for this bishop. Careful, here, most players, I'll say it again, what do? Bishop to e2, playing passively because they're afraid of these kinds of pins, when in reality, they could get a lot out of these moves. How could we start our hunt? It's obvious, just like in the example we just saw, we're going to play h3. In this case, we'd be super happy if they gave up the bishop pair, right? Normally, they'll keep holding on to this pin here. All right, so what are we going to do? We're going to play g4, which is super necessary in this case to go after this bishop. Because now, when it retreats, let me repeat, okay? A knight sacrifice wouldn't be useful here, since we're not castled and they'd just be given with the knight for nothing. The bishop retreats, and then we'll play the move knight to e5. All right, let's evaluate this position. We're threatening to win the bishop. In fact, if we want, we can already win it, since this bishop can't escape anywhere. It could just go here, but the move f3 would force it to retreat. That's why now, black has to play something else. It really doesn't matter to us. The good thing about this video is that you don't have to memorize the moves. You just need to understand the ideas, so you can apply them in your own games, no matter what you play. For example, let me give you an example. What happens if they play e6? Just to say something. Are we going to capture this bishop right away? Now, we're going to play a5, a very good move. What it's threatening is obvious. If black gets careless now and plays, for example, knight from b to d7, we play h5, and we've won a bishop. It looks like it has a square on e4, but after f3, we've simply and successfully trapped and won this light squared bishop. That's why here, the move h4 is actively threatening to play h5 and winning a bishop. Very well. I'm sure many of you are thinking, yes, but black doesn't have to play a random move. They have much better options, like h6 or h5. It doesn't really matter which one they choose to give the bishop an essential escape route for the piece. That's right, this is correct, but that's exactly what we were waiting for. Once they've finally given the bishop an escape route, now is the perfect time, remember this very well, to go ahead and capture it. And this game, my friends, is pretty much decided at this point. Not just tactically, but more importantly, positionally. When they recapture with the knight, our structure is so solid that we can continue with bishop to d3. Queen to d3 would also be possible, but bishop to d3 is much better, targeting this spot here. We're attacking a point on g6 that probably can't be defended in any way, simply by bringing the king closer. If they try to push it forward, we would just capture with the pawn, and thanks to the rook's pin, they wouldn't be able to recapture. So now, the only possible option they have is to come defend with the king. It is absolutely clear that this position is completely and decisively winning for white. We're in a much better position. The king will never be able to castle again, and it'll be very easy to attack. And now I'm going to show you one of my favorite ways to punish this pen. Alright, you need to understand this. When a bishop moves so far just to bother us, what is it doing? It's shifting further away from its original starting square, which unfortunately leaves several vulnerable weaknesses on the queen side. Right? So what are we going to do? Well, now we're going to punish it in the following way. We're going to play c4. There's no way to be passive here. We have to be active. We play c4, and we're threatening something obvious to capture this pawn, which would give us a really strong center after knight to c3. Logical moves here. Well, for example, maybe the best move would be e6, right? Why? Because it opens up a path for their other bishop while also defending a pawn we just attacked. Taking here wouldn't be a good idea because we get to develop our bishop for free, right? Alright, the important thing. What are we gonna do? Well, they're pinning our knight here, and the queen is right behind it, isn't she? So we move the queen to b3. Now this knight is no longer pinned, and more importantly, we attack the weaknesses left behind when the bishop left its home square. Very good. We're threatening queen takes b7 and also threatening the rook afterwards. A totally natural reaction would be to play bishop 6, for example. The thing is, now we've just added too much fuel to the fire. The queen is no longer pinned, so the knight can move. All right, let's move the knight over here, taking advantage of all these weaknesses that the player with the black pieces has left by being careless and trying to pin our knight when it wasn't the right time. Now, if the bishop is threatened, well, the bishop isn't the problem, it can just retreat. What's the real problem? Well, the real issue now is those white squares. We've managed to weaken them.
What is that?
Because we've counterattacked on the opposite flank. For example, let me explain. Pawn takes pawn would be a tremendous move. And why pawn takes pawn? Because now we can bring in the other bishop. Once again, we're taking advantage of those weaknesses. They have to block the check. There's only one way to block it, by placing a piece on d7, since putting it here would be heavily defended by both the knight and the pawn, right? So knight to b7 would be a perfectly good example, and here we'd already have a devastating move. We're pinning this knight here, putting pressure over here. What we need to do is put even more pressure, and we're gonna do that by playing e4, a real bombshell move. Why is e4 such a bombshell if we're just giving away the pawn and they can take it however they want? Well, e4 is a bombshell because it attacks the bishop, attacks the pawn, and most importantly, it opens up this diagonal for the light squared bishop. For example, if they capture the pawn with their pawn, it would simply be checkmate. And I assure you, my friends, it wouldn't be the first time I've delivered a checkmate like this. So they have to take, for example, with the bishop. It's obvious, right? With the knight, they don't want to stop defending the square that's being heavily supported. In this case, we've lost a pawn, but that's the least of our worries. We're being active with our pieces. Now it's time for our other bishop, the one on the dark squares, to come into play. So what does that mean? It means we have this knight pinned twice. We have this knight that's defending the other one, and it's also pinned here, and pinned there. Now this is a real pin, not like the one our opponent tried to pull off. There's no way out of this position. For example, no matter what they do, let's say we make the move. Just as an example, knight takes knight. I'm just doing this without thinking too much, because now they can't capture with the king because of the bishop, they can't capture with the queen because of the bishop, and they can't capture with the knight because then we take the queen. So at this point, we have the game essentially completely under our control since we'd be ahead by a full piece. So in this video, I want to show you that a lot of times when someone pins one of our pieces, we get scared, but really what they're doing is a bad idea, and we can counterattack in a really strong way. I hope all this knowledge has been helpful to you. I'd really appreciate it if you could give me a like if you found this helpful. It's totally free, and it really supports me a lot. So if I see that this video gets a lot of likes, I'll make more videos like this, so you can keep learning more and more every day. I really hope you truly enjoyed this fantastic video, and I'll see you tomorrow, as always, in another brand new chess video, my friends. Take care. Goodbye.